to Eli for helping me with that event on the 7th of July in Glastonbury, which has just got released. It's now on through UK Column. It was live streamed and it's gone out on every platform now, and all the different speakers, because we got climate scientists to challenge the local council, who really didn't have much of a clue about what's going on. So do catch up with that. It's on Rumble and Odyssey and BitChute and everything else, and it's called the Great Net Zero Debate, and it's there now for all to see. But it's obviously divided up into different speakers. We had 2 climate scientists. We had a few videos with Dr. Shiva explaining the structure of the IPCC and carbon credits, and how the carbon credits actually it's all about sort of stakeholder capitalism. And then we had Ian Jarvis speaking about, the wonderful Ian Jarvis speaking about 5G, and we had 2 climate scientists, Peter Taylor and Ralph Ellis, talking about climate and sort of telling it how it is with climate. So anyway, the more that we can make a noise about net zero, hopefully we can try and penetrate this this nonsense. Anyway, that's really what my job at the moment. Anyway, lovely to see you all here. Thank you so much for coming. It really is lovely to see so many people and such a lovely event. I just want to start. I think I'll stand down here. I feel better down here. Can you see? Yeah, you can still see me. The screen's a little bit faded, but I just wanted to put into perspective the timeline of some of these globalist organisations, because from my research, it's really the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, that seem to really be behind everything, and they sort of set up, and as I go through this, I've evidenced it, and I'm sure other people have evidenced it as well, but it's good to reinforce it, because really we are under a massive programme that's been going along for a very, very long time on how to control us and how to bring in global governance, and that's really what I'm about. So you find that the Rockefeller Foundation was formed in 1913, and the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation came a little bit later in 1940. But after the 1913, you had the League of Nations, which was the precursor to the United Nations. You had the Council on Foreign Relations in 21. The Lucis Trust, that's another sort of working of the United Nations. That's their publishers. It used to be formerly called the Lucifer Trust, but they thought that sounded a bit bad, and I don't know why. Anyway, then you had the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and the United Nations in 1948, the Club of Rome in 1968, the World Economic Forum in 1971, and we're hearing a lot about them now, but they were actually formed many years ago, and not many people realise that, and the Trilateral Commission in 1978. That's just to sort of make people understand how long this has all been going on. Now, of course, I talk about Agenda 21, and it was Agenda 21 up until 2015 when they turned it into Agenda 2030. That is just a date. It's not. It's a goal, really. But the bones of the control grid started in 1992 at the Earth Summit in 1992, where the Earth Summit was launched in Rio de Janeiro, and it's also called Sustainable Development. It's a 42-chapter document. On the face of it, it talks about sustainability, environmentalism and conservation, but at its heart, it seeks to divide man from nature and take control of all the resources on the planet, land, sea, minerals, and just about everything, under the deception of saving the world. And this has really come from, all the research that I've done, which I will reveal to you. The precursors to Agenda 21 were 3 very important Club of Rome reports. The Club of Rome was like a think tank. It was a think tank that provided the United Nations with action plans to come up with. And there were 3 major action plans that came out of the Club of Rome that really made the bones of Agenda 21. And I'm just going to briefly go through these, because it's just making you see that that all of this was planned a very long time ago. In 1971, the Club of Rome produced. What Agenda 21 seeks to achieve, sorry, I'm going ahead of myself, is top-down global governance populations moved into concentrated urban areas called smart cities or human settlement zones near train lines. No cars or air travel. Every human action surveilled and carbon taxed. This is their end game goal. This is not necessarily what will happen. Concentration of wealth and power is handed over to the surveillance state, and they're bringing in surveillance capitalism and cashless society, so CBDCs, digital IDs, and all the rest of it. That's what their aim is. Just to let you know what the Club of Rome is, it's a global think tank for the United Nations. It was founded in 1968 at the Rockefeller private estate in Bellagio in Italy by Aurelio Pecce, who really was the starter of the Club of Rome. He was an Italian industrialist, and he worked for the Rockefeller Foundation and the UN. The main purpose for the Club of Rome is to formulate a crisis through which the world could be united under one government. Global problems require global solutions. So they're there to sort of give out the problem reaction solution, the Hegelian dialect. So they create problems, so there's a reaction, and they come up with the solution. And that's what the Club of Rome is about. Now, I'll get back to Limits to Growth. This is probably another copy. But Limits to Growth was the first Club of Rome report published to create Agenda 21. And it was all about population. It's always all about population and depopulation and how there are finite resources. It was in 1972. It's the report on exponential economic and population growth with finite supply of resources, studied by mainly made by computer simulation. And it was the ideology of overpopulation was very popular in the 1970s. There was a guy called Paul Ehrlich who wrote the population bomb, but that never exploded because, again, it was based on computer simulation. So it was really trying to point out and trying to put fear into the population that we have finite resources, there's not enough to go around, and these computer simulations made wild predictions about what the population would be by 1980, for instance. Apparently we wouldn't be able to feed ourselves by 1980, according to this. So it was way off the mark. Now in 1976, there was the United Nations headed up something called the Vancouver Plan, and this was about land. And this is what it said in there. Land, because of its unique nature and the crucial role it plays in human settlements, cannot be treated as an ordinary asset, controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is also a principal instrument of the accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. Of wealth, and therefore contributes to social. If unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes, social justice, urban renewal and development. The provision of decent dwellings can only be achieved if land is used in the interests of society as a whole. So this was a sort of communitarian plan for people not to own any land privately or any property, and that everything would be held in common. And it's all part of the communitarian plan. Now, this was in 1976, the Vancouver Plan. So it just shows you how far back this was going. Now, in 1970, Zbigniew Brzezinski reignited something called the technocracy movement from the 1930s. And he called it the new economic order, which is what we're living under now. This is why, you know, everything's being redesigned economically, and they're trying to push everything digitally. But this was in 1970. He wrote a book called Between the Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era. And it was all about technocracy taking over from the normal systems that we had, like price-based economies and real money. He studied at Columbia University. Columbia University seems to have been a hotbed of communitarian thinking at the time in the 1970s. He was at Columbia University with M.K. Hubbard and Howard Scott, who were key in forming the new economic order. A resource-based economy with CO2 carbon taxing. Resources are more valuable than money in the technocratic age. They must be controlled and owned. And I just want to just briefly talk about the technocracy movement, because it's important, because this is a movement that happened in 1930. It was after the Great Depression, when everybody had lost their faith in politicians and bankers, which, let's face it, is kind of where we are now. They proposed a replacement of capitalism with an energy-based economy, as opposed to a price-based economy. It was reintroduced by the Trilateral Commission, Zbigniew-Brzezinski, in '73 as the new economic order known as sustainable development. So the new economic order is sustainable development. And the green economy, many alumni of Columbia are heading up at present the agenda. Klaus Schwab, Amitai Etzioni, he's the man that invented commutarianism in 1968, George Soros, David Rockefeller, Zbigniew-Brzezinski, and more. They were an elite group of technocrats trying to implement what was then global warming to create a new carbon-based economy. So that was in the 1930s, they were at it then. They couldn't do it because they hadn't got the tech. Now they have, so it's easy. The next Club of Rome report was something called Our Common Future, which was written by Gro Harlem Brundtland and Maurice Strong in the United Nations, the World Commission on Environment and Development, and it's sometimes called the Brundtland Report. And this was a sort of, the ideology of it is the wealth needs to be distributed from wealthy countries to poorer nations, as wealthy countries are destroying the planet, India and China. So it was almost like a second Marshall Plan to transfer wealth from what they called the polluting West to India and China at the time, who were third world countries. And it sounded very worthy, but what happened was the transfer of wealth took all our industry over to India and China, who are now the biggest polluters, and we are not, and we're being sanctioned with carbon taxes. And that's kind of that in a nutshell. It's a way of destroying the West. The West has to be destroyed before the other countries. And that's the problem at the moment. So the wealth transfer went over. All our manufacturing industry went over to India and China. And we don't make anything anymore. And that is a bit of a problem. We don't produce anything. And then the third bones of Agenda 21, I'm sorry, was this one. It's falling to bits. I've used it so much. It's a Club of Rome report called The First Global Revolution. And this was, Our Common Future was in 1987, by the way, but this one was published just before the Earth Summit in 1991. And it really was the beginning of the ideology of pushing global warming. And because I will just do you a quote from it, because it kind of sums it up. They were chucking around ideas about how to create a global crisis that would need a solution, you know, a global solution, and how they could get everybody on board to actually, you know, to mitigate this crisis. And so they talk about scapegoats and how we need enemies, because the military-industrial complex really needs enemies. Otherwise, there's nothing to fight and no reason to go to war. The need for enemies seems to be a common historical factor. States have striven to overcome domestic failure and internal contradictions by designating external enemies. The scapegoat practice is as old as mankind itself. When things get too difficult at home, divert attention by adventure abroad. Bring the divided nation together to face an outside enemy, either a real one or one invented for the purpose. And then they go on to identify that enemy. And they say, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, and water shortages would fit the bill. In their totality and in their interactions, these phenomena do constitute a common threat, which demands the solidarity of all peoples. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it's only through changed attitudes and behaviour that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is mankind itself, is humanity itself. So we have been identified as the enemy, and that's why we feel as though we're being attacked, because we are. Because that is the way they see us. They've fabricated this lie that we've destroyed everything, and we haven't. If anything, it's just a means to an end to seize global control. And this is the man who This is Maurice Strong. Sorry, can everybody see? Am I in the way? Maybe. Maurice Strong, he was the grandfather of Agenda 21. He was the Secretary General of the United Nations in 1992, and he set the Earth Summit up. And he's sometimes called it's sometimes called the Unsaid Conference, the UNCED conference. He's a member of the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, the Council for Foreign Relations. He's actually dead now, but and he's a member of the Fabian Society. He's a self-confessed communist in ideology and capitalist in methodology, which is a typical sort of communitarianism thing because it's corporate capitalism. And he was exiled to China to avoid prison in the US for being involved in the oil for food scandal in 1995, where the UN Security Council made a resolution to supply Iraq with food in exchange for oil. There were revelations of corruption of funds involving Maurice Strong, Adnan Khashoggi, and many other oil billionaires. He loved China. He was really very comfortable in China. He ended his days there. He was exiled there. He loved the Chinese Communist Party and the system there. He was friends with Chairman Mao. So this is the man that actually created Agenda 21. There we are. Yeah, this is him, and there's one quote that really sums up what we're under now. It says, "The effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound re-engineering of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced, a major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action will be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level." And this is why the whole carbon and the net zero thing is so important, because this is what they're doing. They're making a real deal about every human action will need to be carbon taxed. They will try and tax us on everything. And that's kind of what that statement in 1992 meant. After the Earth Summit, they published this. I mean, this is massive. This is the Global Diversity Assessment, and it took, I think it was 3.3 billion to produce. And it's an inventory of everything on our planet and how they're going to manage it, literally. And it's, yeah. And this is what they did. I mean, it lists every plant, every mineral, every animal, everything on the planet is in that book. It's an inventory, and how it will be managed and how it will be conserved. And the humans, on page 993 of that, they talk about the human settlement zones and the buffer zones in between for where the humans can go. So it's quite an eye-opener. Anyway, private property and farmland are unsustainable. 75% of the US is to be given over, this is in here, to self-willed land and stocked with bears, wolves and vegetation. Page 993 of the Global Diversity Assessment Wildlands Project plans to remove 50% of the United States population into urban areas or human settlement zones, consisting of high-rise dwellings and situated near railway tracks. The railway will be the means of transportation and private cars to be phased out. The Obama stimulus was the source of funding for this, along with the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, who also funded the Club of Rome reports that I just mentioned, the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation. So the Obama stimulus was the source of funding for this project. By 2030, there are plans to force European farmers. Now, this is interesting because this is a slide from one of my PowerPoints in probably 2014. Sorry, I've been around a long time. It says, you know, there's plans to force European farmers to vacate 75 million acres of roughly the size of Poland under sustainable development. And we're seeing that with the Irish and the Dutch farmers, you know, what they've been through. So this is actually happening, and I found this. So, you know, there's a talk of mine somewhere on YouTube that I did in 2014, and so much of it has come true. You know, cashless society, all the stuff. I'm not saying it you know, this is a given, because we've woken up since then. So we have to be very aware that we have to not comply to all of this. This is their agenda, not ours. I want to point that out. So at the Earth Summit, you know, after they finished the Earth Summit, they decided to bring it down from global to local, to bring it into our town councils and our localities. And that's how they thought they would win it. And they did, because a lot of our councils are now controlled with green agendas, they call climate emergencies. All of that infiltration has been done, and it's up to us now to unpick it, which I'm trying to do at the moment. With, you know, and hopefully other people are doing it in their own town councils, which is brilliant. And ICLEI was set up. It's the International Committee for Local and Environmental Initiatives. So this was like an NGO that came in, and it's a bit like Common Purpose. They sort of taught everybody how to be sustainable and what needs to be done to save the planet. And ICLEI was set up to implement Agenda 21 from global to local. It's now working in every town council in the UK. And then you've got these funny community groups that sort of popped up. You know, you may recognise some of these in your own locality, but I certainly, Power to Change was in my locality, and so was Unlimited. And they hold workshops in sustainable development and leadership programmes, and that's how it all comes in, you know. And this has been going on since the 1990s. And, you know, then they set up the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it was set up after the Earth Summit, and it was made up of policymakers, biologists, scientists, paid to push the narrative of anthropogenic global warming. They didn't push the disinformation. Their research funding was cut. If they didn't push the disinformation, their research funding was cut. And that's why all the whistleblowers are retired. I mean, most scientists and people that actually come out are retired, because everyone gets their funding cut, and their wages, they're sacked if they don't follow the narrative. That's just the 3 E's of sustainable development. Social equity, which means individuals give up their personal rights and needs for the community. Economic prosperity, the free market replaced by public-private partnerships. We're seeing so much of that now. Our representational government is being taken over by public-private partnerships, private money. Public-private and international wealth transfer. And then you've got the ecological integrity. Your individual rights are given up for the rights of the community, which sounds very worthy, but actually, you know, your individual rights are really important, and we don't want to lose sight of those. And then in 2009, we had ClimateGate. I don't know if any of you ever heard of ClimateGate. Yes, you have, good. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I mean, I've got a few things that you can look at. The Hockey Stick Illusion is an amazing book. And certainly, the Global Warming, a Case Study in Groupthink, that was written by Christopher Booker. And he was a great friend of mine. Sadly, he's passed on as well. But he wrote that, and it's a really in-depth study on how global warming became groupthink, and how he went to all the climate conferences. He was there at the Paris Agreement, Paris Accord, when Trump walked out. And it's amazing, and it's free on the internet, PDF. Read it if you really want to know about climate. So anyway, in 2009, 1,079 emails were hacked at the University of East Anglia and the Hadley Research Centre by a US intelligence agency. The content of these emails was damning for the global warming lobby. Michael Mann from Penn State University was encouraging the scientists at these institutions to falsify the data, to ride the decline, or hide the decline, sorry, in real-time temperature data and alter the graphs. The famous hockey stick graph was one of the lies that came out of ClimateGate, but the original emails were revealing of a huge lie, shoring up the industry of climate change. And it is an industry, and you see, you can't really see it very well, but on that graph, on the illusion of the hockey stick, you see it, the red bit goes up. Well, actually, in reality, it went down, and they called it the hockey stick. And so, yeah, that's what happened. And the thing is that nature needs CO2. This whole CO2 thing is mad. I mean, we're all kind of older. When I was at school, I was taught that it was the gas of life, that it actually made things grow. And I know that farmers put CO2 in their polytunnels to make things grow. And if it goes really low, nothing grows. So it seems to be a sort of a death wish that they're pushing on us. Because, you know, that plant at the front, that's 800 parts per million. in order to grow properly. And then the next one is 400 parts per million, which is what we are now at the moment. We're about 400 parts per million. And then if it goes down to 220, it starts to droop a bit. Then 190, it's really drooping. And by 150 parts per million, it's dead. And so low CO2, if they want absolute zero, which is what they're pushing for, and we'll talk about the absolute zero document, everything will die, you know, including us. So it is a death, you know, it's a death cult. It's mad. And I don't understand how people, you know, are managing to believe all this, but they are. Now, I'm doing a sort of timeline. So we get to 2010. So that was 2009 was ClimateGate. In 2010, the Rockefeller Foundation published a paper called The Scenarios for the Future of Technology. And they had some various scenarios which actually played out in lockdown, the lockstep document. There were 4 scenarios that they talked about in this document. There was lockstep, clever together, hack attack, and smart scramble. And I'm just briefly going to go through these because the lockstep document was, I'll just go to that first, was a world, this is the way they described it, a world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. A virus emerges from a third world country and rapidly spreads across the world, destroying the economies of the West. So this is a what-if scenario. These are all scenarios that they dream up. A virus, and it spreads across the world, destroying the economies of the West. Governments use the virus as an excuse to advance technocratic surveillance, implementing transhumanist and biological technologies and vaccine passports. In this scenario, the masses totally blindly welcome the tyranny, abandoning their sovereignty for the greater good. So this is the next one that they, in this paper, was clever together. A world in which highly coordinated and successful strategies emerge for addressing both urgent and entrenched worldwide issues. Strong cooperation on a range of issues drives technological breakthroughs that combat disease, climate change, and energy shortages. And then they've got hack attack. Due to a cyber attack in an economically unstable and shock-prone world, in which governments weaken, criminals thrive, and dangerous innovations emerge. So you can see that these scenarios, you know, they're almost like telling us what they intend to do. Whether this really happens, who knows? They're mad. But it's quite telling. So, but I have to say that Klaus Schwab has talked about the cyber polygon quite extensively. He's talking about a big cyber attack that will really knock out all our tech. The internet and everything. That kind of sounds like a scenario that could happen where things go a bit wonky for a while. And then they talk about smart scramble. In an economically depressed world in which individuals and communities develop localized makeshift solutions to a growing set of problems. So that's kind of what smart scramble's about. And I'm wondering, we've done lockstep. Are we at clever together at the moment? And will we get to hack attack? And who knows? Or hack attack and then clever together? Who knows? But they are mad. But it's a very interesting document because what happened in lockstep literally played out in 2020. 10 years later, we were in lockstep, no doubt about that. So they'd planned it anyway. Now, in 2015, the Agenda 21 became 2030, Agenda 2030. And it was in September, the UN General Assembly met to discuss the future of the world and to unveil Agenda 2030. They launched the 17 goals. So really, it was a deployment of Agenda 21. They honed it. It was 8 goals before that, the Millennium Development Goals, which didn't get achieved. So they needed to accelerate it. And there is this acceleration program going on all the time. They're trying to accelerate. And that's what we're seeing now, because it's going completely mad, because they're accelerating it very fast, which is actually good because people are waking up. This was really to bring the 8 goals and turn them into 17 goals and really make a push to accelerate them. And of course, in 2016, we had the re-engineering of society with COVID-19, the Great Reset, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Very timely books that Klaus Schwab brought out, and literally telling us what was coming, the technocratic age. And then we had, obviously, the World Economic Forum saying, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. We didn't ask for that. We did not ask for that. Is there anything I should have said about that? No. And then you've got Klaus Schwab. He's a really dark character. I mean, his father, Eugene Schwab, owned a company called Escher Miss in the 1930s in Ravensburg. And it was an engineering company. He actually used slave labour. He collaborated with the Nazis' quest to create nuclear technology. He was instrumental in creating machinery vital to the Nazi war effort. Klaus Schwab was involved with illegal and Klaus, when he took over the company in the 1960s, he was involved with illegal nuclear development in South Africa, supporting the apartheid regime. He heads up the Davos meetings every year, obviously, and he set up the global leaders for tomorrow. And we know that all these people have been put in place. He set up the global leaders program so that global leaders could be trained up to be leaders of every country that is on this agenda. And you'll find that the original ones were Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, Angela Merkel. This was in the 1970s. And now we've got all the Boris Johnson, we've got Jacinda Ardern, Bill Gates, they're all there. The global leaders. They're all graduates of Schwab's indoctrination camp for young globalist leaders. First established in 1992. Oh, actually, it was a bit earlier than that. Angela Merkel, Nicolas Sarkozy, Tony Blair. There's currently 1,300 graduates, including Jacinda Ardern, Emmanuel Macron, Jean-Claude Juncker from the EU, Justin Trudeau, Vladimir Putin, Angelina Baerbock, and she's the German Green lady. Anyway, they've all been put in positions of power, and it's very interesting that their CVs are a bit sketchy. They're not very bright. I mean, you look at Zelensky, for instance, he's done it. These people aren't great brains, but because they've done the leadership programs, they've been put in positions of power to push this agenda. And then in 2019, we had the United Nations Strategic Framework Partnership Agreement. Now, this is in June 2019. We're getting nearer. And they... Sorry. Climate change wasn't working fast enough, so they had to push the 17 goals. So they created this acceleration. And then it played out in Event 201, November 19, where they held a tabletop exercise. The same people, Klaus Schwab, Antonio Guterres, and people from the UN, they got together in Johns Hopkins Institute, and they did a tabletop scenario about what if there was a pandemic in a third world country. It was Brazil in this case, and it was a tabletop exercise. It was a 3-day event, and they literally played it out. What if? And of course they'd invited Bill and Melinda Gates. What a surprise! And guess who had the solution? Yeah, they had the solution. Event 201. Look it up. It's still online. And then obviously since then we've had the WHO Pandemic Treaty, which gives the WHO powers to implement lockdowns like the ones we saw in Shanghai and Beijing, using increased totalitarian rule, house arrests. Why are the WHO given these powers? We didn't elect them. They're unaccountable. We didn't vote them in. We have to reject everything that's being presented to us. And then we've got, the privatisation and digitalisation of our NHS, the breakdown of our NHS. This is the worst thing that could have happened. During COVID, the NHS was destroyed, completely destroyed. And we're seeing it now. You cannot see a doctor. Waiting lists are ridiculous. And so what they're doing is they're trying to digitalise it and put it onto a digital platform. And that's why you're not being able to see anyone, because in the background, they have spent billions creating NHSX, the new digital NHS. The Secretary of Health and Social Care has announced that NHSX, NHS Digital, will emerge with NHS England and NHS Improvement. Did you know about all these? This is the new technology. It's predictive, preventative, personalised and participatory medicine. The NHS at its core will be working around the genetics in disease, reaching into the DNA of every man and woman in the UK. This app will monitor every aspect of your life, your shopping habits, your financial and social status, education, hereditary genomics, fitness and more, feeding into the corporate superstate created by the COVID-19 crisis and powered by mass surveillance. According to NHSX, from 2020 to 2025, genomic medicine will be embedded into routine care. Now, genomics is not the driver of disease, not entirely. There's loads of other reasons why disease happens. It could be environmental, it could be socioeconomic, but they're pinning it all on genomics, that your DNA is everything, and they're monitoring it so that they can look deeply into your lifestyle and sanction you if you're doing the wrong things for your health. So this is what the digitalisation of the NHS is all about. It's about more taxing your lifestyle. You know, you'll be taxed for your lifestyle. And I want to just talk about the Absolute Zero document. I presented this to my town council. They didn't know that it existed. They were a bit, thank you. They had no idea. Now this was created in, I think it was I have had it on my I did have it on my website for about 3 or 4 years. But it's become more, known now because we're seeing it happen. But it's really to bring everything to absolute zero. So nothing, we don't have any CO2 at all. And this was debated in the House of Lords in 2020, and it was passed to be given immediate implementation. On this page, where are we? On this page, this is page 4. You can't see that, but at the top it actually says, it's the UK Fires Absolute Zero document. Look it up. Commissioned by the UK government from Cambridge and Oxford universities as a think tank. Yeah, it was read in the House of Lords. No planes out of the UK by 2030, or in. No shipping out of the UK, or in or out of the UK by 2030. No beef lamb production after 2030. No wood-burning stoves, no gas boilers, no gas appliances. Restrictions on appliances restricted to electric, and the reduction to actually have a very low power output. Food production, total energy to transport to be cut by 60%. Construction, all concrete and mortar to be phased out. Retrofitting of all houses to comply with net zero legislation. Manufacturing reduced by 50%. Goods smaller and to last longer. Electricity, wind and solar, that has massive storage problems, and a 4-fold increase in renewables, fossil fuels phased out. Now, if you saw a pie chart of the national grid and you see how much is renewables, it's a tiny, tiny sliver. We're not going to, if they phase all of this out, we are going to be cold and hungry, basically, because they're stopping all the imports and the exports. So we've got to really think about our local resilience, how we feed ourselves, where, come together in your local communities, because this is, they've said they'll do things and it's happened. It's our job now to wake up and not let it happen, because if we're aware, we know what's coming, and we can actually hedge it. We can do something else, and set up your own food community groups, growing your food, getting it from good suppliers, and cutting out the supermarkets, because the supermarkets are captured, completely captured. That's another thing about net zero. It's just net zero, zero you. I just wanted to talk about ESGs. Has anybody heard about environmental social governance? Yeah, well done. Well, this is going to affect businesses. It's called Environment and Social Governance, and it's coming in. In fact, I think it is in already. Businesses will be under scrutiny to conform to the ESGs. This will cost them and will emerge as a climate tax on every business in the UK. Are your employees cycling to work? You get sanctioned if they're not. Are you recycling? Are you conforming to eco-regulations? Are you exercising diversity? Are you using clean technology? Are you using sustainable products? Is your workplace safe? It goes on, and it's there to destroy businesses. to make it so difficult for them to actually, and expensive for them to continue, that people will just give up. And it's awful, you know. It really is a social, you know, it's workplace, putting all sorts of regulations in, environmental regulations, social, you know, equal opportunities, freedom of association, health and safety, human rights, customer products responsibility, child. You know, you've got to be, they're making it sound good, but actually it's a big restriction on and also a burden on employers to try and navigate around all this eco stuff and governance stuff. And the governance is, you know, business ethics compliance, board independence, executive compensation, shareholder democracy, because all of it's being owned by public-private partnerships. So it's a bit of a minefield. And then in our own homes, you know, we've got to comply to these energy performance certificates, which we've always had. You know, when you sell your house, you've always got that rainbow at the end, you know. But that is going to become really, really important, and you will not be able to sell your home. Now, in Ireland, I've just come back from Ireland, they've just, or was it Scotland? Oh, I did both. Anyway, I think it was Scotland, they've said you cannot sell your home if you've got a gas boiler. You've got to put in a ground source heat pump or something like that. Yeah, they've said you cannot sell your home with a gas boiler or gas appliances in it. So this is coming, you know, this is the draconian nonsense that they're trying to inflict on us. You know, we just don't let them pass the door, you know, just tell them to go away. And wood burning stoves, they want all those ripped out. I mean, even Sadiq Khan has gone back on his word. He did allow more efficient, eco-efficient wood burners in London. He's now gone back on that and said no wood burners in London. Everybody that's put wood burners in. And it stops your autonomy of heating your home. You know, this is what they want. They want you to be reliant on the flick of a switch. They can switch it off. Electricity is very easy to switch off. So then we've got public-private partnerships owning everything. This is what they want. They want public-private partnerships and NGOs are undermining politics and all Western government. Little do our MPs understand that big business is destroying representational government in the form of oligarchy. These extremely powerful multinationals have the ability and are taking over national governments globally to create global governance driven by greed. Corporate structure will undermine everything. It's the Russian-Chinese form of corporate communism, or communitarianism. And a lot of it, if you've heard of the Covenant of Smart City Mayors, that is what's coming in. Our regional governments are being broken down, and the power is being devolved to the Covenant of Smart City Mayors. And they are the ones with the power, not our government. This is global governance come in over our representational government. So we need to be very aware of that. And if you look at your local plan, you've got your national planning policy framework, you'll see all these policies coming through. Look at your local national planning policy framework. This is where all the stuff's being brought in. I'm going ahead a bit. The other problem is really what they want to do is turn the planet into a business. And we are the commodities. And nature is a commodity. They are financialising nature. They don't want us in nature. They want to get us out of nature. They want to restrict our movement in nature. And they're setting up these things called natural asset corporations or natural asset classes, where large swathes of our countryside is being bought up by multinationals. You know, BA are buying up massive areas of forest land, apparently to offset their carbon credits. You've got Estee Lauder buying up national parks in Wales, and big corporations buying the land. And this is just so that really it's all in corporate hands. And they financialise it. They will be setting up businesses in nature. There'll be glamping, fishing. You won't be able to go fishing without it being a corporate entity. You won't be able to forage without it being a corporate entity. You won't be able to go hiking or anywhere unless somebody is making money out of it. So their idea with these natural asset corporations is to own nature and financialize it. You know, this is an abomination. Also, they want to financialize us with digital IDs and everything that we, you know, that they'll be data harvesting us with every authentication process. And this is why we've got all the cameras on the tills in supermarkets now. So one of the ones that really gets to me is really the financialisation of children in school. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of SEL learning. I know Rhonda has. But it's social and emotional learning, and a lot of schools are taking up this model. And it is a way of, SEL learning aims to create the perfect global citizen. Children are monitored and surveilled throughout their education. Children are taught to be calm, precise, mindfulness, consider others before themselves, all of that stuff. But it sounds very worthy, but actually it's psychologically profiling children to work out their emotional reactions, and they have to monitor their emotional reactions throughout the day at school. You know, what are they feeling? How do they feel? Why do they feel that? And all of this is being fed into impact investors' data. And the impact investors are making money on the future outcomes of those children. So those children are, all of their social and emotional learning is being fed into a computer, and then it's sold on the blockchain to impact investors. Now, this is hard to get your head around, but there's an amazing woman called Lynn Taylor in America. She's called the Common Core Diva, and she explains it perfectly. And it really is a way of financializing our children. And the impact investors gamble, a bit like a futures market, on the outcomes of the children. And they can work out who are the leaders, who's going to excel, who's going to fall, you know, by the wayside. Even the ones that fall by the wayside, they will be making money on with pharmaceuticals and all sorts of other programs, NGO programs, to help those children. So all of this is financializing our children in our schools. And I've only just found out that my son's, my grandchildren's school has actually just implemented this, and I'm trying to find a way out to get them homeschooled, because this is just awful. Yeah, it's really bad. Basically, yeah, it's psychological profiling. I mean, look at this website. It's at SEL4MA. Data harvesting, pay for success schemes. Information is sold on to impact bond investors via non-fungible tokens on the blockchain with for-profit partners and enablers. Social, emotional learning, facial recognition, emotions, gambling on the future outcomes of our children. It's ill-defined, unproven, and connected to Common Core. And do look up the Common Core Diva, Lynn Taylor. She's amazing. She's done loads of work on it, and I have to take my hat off to her. She's incredible. Zero Trust World, they're trying to get rid of VPN so that every time you open up a computer, look at your emails or whatever, that you have to authenticate. This is a way of bringing in the CBDCs so that you can't, or in the digital IDs, so that every transaction you have to authenticate. And every time you go to a supermarket, every transaction you make, you're authenticating. In that authenticating process, they are data harvesting everything from your credit cards, your transactions, what your lifestyle is, everything. And that's being sold on to impact investors. And we've got facial recognition, digital ID, CBDCs. This is all coming into the supermarkets. If you look at those glass doors, they've put all the goods now, fresh goods between glass doors. Those are ready to have sensors on them for your digital recognition, your facial recognition. And if you haven't got enough carbon credits, those doors will not open. And that's from Aman Jabi. If anybody knows Aman Jabi in the States, look him up. He worked in Silicon Valley for 24 years and developed all this technology. He's a whistleblower now. Aman Jabi, Jabbi. Amazing man. Yeah, sooner or later we could see engineered food shortages. You know, the supply chain, you know, Brexit in Ukraine, war is a reason. The destruction of food plants by explosions of fire, the seizure of land under UN Sustainable Development, zero policies, Dutch farmers, and they've had all the, you know, the whole nitrogen thing. They were stopped from using nitrogen, which makes everything grow. And the Irish farmers given subsidies not to grow and phase out beef and lamb production by 2025 to 2030. So yeah, human augmentation they want to bring in. This is from the MOD. Human augmentation, the dawn of a new paradigm. So they're trying to merge man with machine, and you know, they're trying to force us into, you know, and they're trying to obviously get rid of, you know, the male and female. So we go from androgynous and undifferentiated from traditional masculine and traditional feminine. And the thing about the metaverse is that they're talking about now, you know, everything's twinned. 10 minutes, thank you. Oh, that's good. That's not too bad. Everything's twinned on the internet. I mean, Aman talks about this. Everything in our world is being twinned in a virtual reality. And this is a horrible thought, that actually reality is something for the reality privileged. And so what they're trying to do is, and it's all in gaming, they're kind of, you know, grooming children to be gamers. And a lot of the time, children are going into virtual reality with their avatars, and they're living a different life, because actually it's tough in this world, isn't it? And the tougher it gets, and the more bizarre it gets, and the more unreal it gets, and the more confusing it gets, kids will want to live in an alternative reality. And this is where the twinning really, you know, that they've twinned every town in the world, every city, every building, every tree, every blade of grass, everything is being twinned. I don't think this will happen myself, but this is what they aim to do. And they aim that when everybody is being so restricted and carbon taxed that in fact you're living, you know, you'll end up in your smart, if they have their way, they want us to end up living in a smart city apartment, not going anywhere, because going places is, you know, you're using up too much carbon, and actually you're wasting too much carbon by living. And you're sitting in your smart city apartment with your virtual reality headset on, and you're living your life elsewhere, because it's easier and it's nicer and it's an escape. And that's what they want. And so they've actually deemed that reality is actually something for the privileged. It says here, this is a reality privilege cited by Mark Anderson in 2021, inspired by Bo Cronin. An interview with billionaire Mark Anderson, he explained reality privilege like this: a small percentage of people live in a real world environment that is rich, even overflowing with glorious substance, beautiful settings, plentiful stimulation, and many fascinating people to talk and work with and date. Everyone lacks reality privilege, and it is therefore they are therefore better off in the metaverse. So the elite will avoid owning nothing and being happy, redistributing their own hoarded wealth, and they will have dominion over the real world. They want everyone else living in a virtual, augmented reality, the metaverse. They are building a fake world for us to play in. Aren't they generous? You know, this is what, you know, it knows no bounds. Just very quickly, I've got a couple of the 17 goals that I just want to interpret. I think I'll just do 2 of them because I've probably only got a few minutes left. No poverty and zero hunger. These are big sort of asks, really. We've got quality education, good health and well-being. I mean, they all sound so worthy. Life on land, good health, and yeah, anyway. Here's, this is how they you know, the 17 goals lead us into the metaverse. Goal 1, end poverty. Poverty alleviation and social protection. The United Nations solution is AI-enabled digital footprint for credit, mobile money access, blockchain identity solutions to enable economic identities for all and refugees. That's what end poverty means to the United Nations. In reality, it's making everyone equally poor. You know, universal basic income for all with fixed amount of carbon credits, analysis of social credit through digital footprint, Facebook, Twitter, other platforms, collect data about individuals' habits, behaviours, skills, as used in the Chinese social credit system, the Zima system. And then you've got end hunger. This is what they've said they want to end hunger by 2030 or 2050, 2030 actually. UN access to food, improved nutrition and food production security, low-cost GMO mass-produced food production, synthetic proteins, insect proteins, no meat, all sensors and blockchain to eliminate waste, loss in food value chain, smart food storage. And the reality is real food replaced with synthetic lab food, low-cost GMO, mass-produced by Monsanto, synthetic proteins, insect proteins. Your consumption habits are recorded on the blockchain, and so you know everything. You're carbon taxed if you eat the wrong things. I'll just do maybe gender equality. Here we go. Inclusive access to education, quality of education and facilities, UN AI-driven assessments to enable the delivery of continuous feedback, AI-driven curriculums, teaching plans, and content driven by devices. The reality is reskilling and upskilling for life, lifelong learning in a gig economy. That means that nobody has secure employment, with pay for success schemes. Education will be remote, online, lifelong training in STEM. That's all our education's being shifted over to STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering and mathematics. There's no humanities in their future for our children, none whatsoever. Accredited with blockchain micro badges and credentials. So every time they move along and they achieve their goals and the impact investors get their money, there's micro badges being generated on the blockchain for pay for success schemes. So the impact investors get their cut. Social reputation and score. So you've got the Chinese social credit system. Children's outcomes determined from birth and AI guided biometrically. Now I am going to sort of stop it there. I'm just going to say, I'll move this on. Oh, I've lost my cursor. Here we go. There are a few more, but I'd just like to say, do log on to the Great Net Zero debate. Thankfully, UK Column helped me with it. They live streamed it, and I think they're putting it up on their website. All the different talks, and you know, go into your local councils and make a noise about net zero, and don't comply. All we have to do is say no to all this. We've got to say no. We've got to put up a fight, and just try and be positive. They've got a horrible future for us. That's not our future, and we can vision something else. They're visioning this. We can vision something else. I just want to say goodbye. Thank you.